Greetings, Realm Lords, Core Bricks here, and welcome back to the Circle of Realms. Now, a long time ago, so long that my hair was much shorter than this, I posted part 1 of a playthrough of a game in the Circle of Realms. Now, work and life kind of got in the way of me doing part 2 to that series, but I finally got that done, and so here it is for you to enjoy. Now, if you remember, part 1 had 4 factions in it. I was controlling the Raiders, and I was up against the Cursed Kingdom, the Rebels, and the Tyranny of Anacria. By the end of the last video, I had killed Anacria's King Sepheth, his first form. He still has 2 more after that, and acquired a nifty Scepter of the Titans. And all the pieces were in play for us to start to see massive conflict, which we will start to see in this second session. So the first big thing that happens in day 2 really is my fault. I'm sailing with my raiders across the sea and they are ready to attack the rebels. And my whole intention is to exploit the fact that the rebels have built their base in a pretty wonky configuration. Their command center was way over here originally, and the rest of their base was being built way out here. And the only people building this outward base were peasants, and back at the command center would be where all of the soldiers could be trained. So the big thing that happens, and it was kind of obvious as I was getting closer, is that I sail in on my ship, the Wolfclaw. And so I just kind of take this ship and I end up coming in, I think somewhere kind of like around there, or maybe it was there. I don't know, I'm not sure. And I only had 3 berserkers on it, so it couldn't really do a whole lot, but I still want to do a little bit of damage, and more importantly, I wanted these guys to die. I need them to die, I need the ship to burn down, so that I can bring my next wave of raiders into the battlefield. And I didn't just want to burn down the ship and get my guys killed doing nothing, so I sent them to go attack the rebels. The first thing I did when I arrived was I lit my own ship on fire so that it would burn down. I couldn't risk it falling into enemy hands, because that would prevent me from moving up altogether. And I had 0 confidence in the rebellion's ability to actually destroy my ship for me. So we set that thing on fire, my men hopped on off the boat, and we attacked the rebels. Now, the rebels were pretty vulnerable. They only had peasants there and Whiskey Steve, who is essentially a hero version of a peasant. Whiskey Steve's technically a nobleman, but he doesn't really fight very well. He doesn't have very strong attacks. His best attack is his drunken blow, where he maybe hurts the enemy, or maybe hurts himself, or maybe does nothing, kind of depending on how you roll. But nonetheless, Whiskey Steve is one of the leaders for the rebellion, and if I could take him out of the game, that would really work out for me and my men. So what did I do? Well, I had my raiders all gang up on Whiskey Steve. The peasants couldn't really do anything to fend them off, and my raiders were just wailing on this poor alcoholic nobleman. Now, the rebel player quickly realizes that Whiskey Steve can't really fend them off on his own, so he starts to send over Heroscape Matres, who is really the true leader of the rebellion and a very dangerous unit. And the nice thing about Heroscape is one of Heroscape's special attacks is to shoot a signal flare up into the sky and summon other rebellion units to him. And so what the rebel player ended up doing was training some units back at their command center, bringing Heroscape up to deal with my men, and then poof, laying an ambush and firing the signal flare to summon more rebel units to gang up on my raiders. Needless to say, my raiders didn't stand a chance. They were all captured by the rebels, and even though we got way closer to killing Lord Lawrence Stevenson or Whiskey Steve than we should have, he still survived that fight. But my ship burnt down, and I was able to progress to the next tech age. So this ship came off the map and to be replaced by a bigger, beefier vessel. Now, when I look back at this move, part of me wonders, I don't know if this was the best strategy. If you watch my factions overview video, you know that the rebels capture all of their opponents and they can later convert them to their side. Well, my 3 berserkers who were defeated trying to kill Lord Lawrence Stevenson, all 3 of them were captured by the rebels. They were thrown into the command center, and eventually I think all 3 of them would be converted against me. So you have to ask yourself, was that a fair trade? I don't know. I probably should have attacked the Kingdom player instead. But speaking of that Kingdom player, something really interesting happened around this time. You see, as we're playing a game in the Circle of Realms, every round we are drawing an environmental condition effect for a particular realm. There are 4 realms in the Circle of Realms, and so we're drawing a card for one of those 4 realms every round. And I can't remember what set it off. It was some sort of a catastrophe coming in. I'm not sure if it was a hurricane or an earthquake. Whatever it was, I don't think it was a big deal. It wasn't affecting the main battlefield where we were. I think it was affecting a realm that no one was really fighting over or doing anything in, probably Legna. But the fact that we drew a catastrophe was a big deal for the game for a few reasons. Whenever you draw a catastrophe card, it activates a Wind of Change. And it's during Winds of Change when factions can realign. They can form alliances with other factions around them. Now, I had just pissed off the rebels, and I didn't exactly want to side with the Kingdom player, because if I sided with them, then I would be fighting 2 enemy players that really rely on capturing people. Kingdom of Anacria, which tries to capture and torture your prisoners, and the Rebellion, who of course captures and converts people. Plus, how annoying would it be if I joined forces with the Kingdom player and had to fight the rebels the entire time right next door to them? So in an unlikely move, I turned to Anacria and I made my pitch. I offered that we join teams. Even though I just killed Sethith, I was like, well, let's let bygones be bygones and let's join forces against the rebels and the kingdom. And much to my delight, Anacria joined in. This, of course, triggered a bit of a panic with the rebels, and the rebels immediately joined forces with the Cursed Kingdom. Even though in the lore, the rebels are rebelling against the kingdom, in this particular circumstances, the rebels rejoined with the kingdom and they reunited into a large force against us. Now, during any winds of change later on, these alliances could be shifted, they could change, but spoiler alert, especially since we were only playing for the one weekend, no one changed sides after that. This little sporadic grab at alliances basically redefined the game from that point onward. And so what did me and my Anacrian ally plan? Well, I was about to come back with a bigger, better ship with more forces, and I figured, I could take that ship and I could come right back over here and attack the rebels. Except this time, I would bring my hero Burtnoth, and I'd also be bringing a second hero that comes with that second wave, the Highlander. And with their joined forces, we would actually really start to pillage and destroy the rebel forces. Meanwhile, what would my Anacrian ally do? Well, he didn't have a ship to sail across the ocean yet, and he didn't feel like waiting around for me to pick him up. So instead, he grabbed Lord Sethith and he had him ride around the world. He was just bringing Sethith over because the Anacrian players still wanted to get all the limbs cut off of Sethith so we could rebuild him into something stronger. And so the best way to guarantee that would happen is to bring Sethith and make him such a juicy target that everyone starts taking a swing at him. And it is Sethith's journey over to the kingdom, which would actually set the stage for our next major battle, which is not a battle that my men are actually going to be present for, and it's going to be occurring over there. So a problem that occurred when me and my Anacrian ally were attacking this kingdom alliance is that basically our plan was he would ride in with Sethith and come in from the north, and then I would sail in with my boat and attack from the south. This was a pretty good strategy because my boat could either attack at the coast or come down the river that runs through Maria, basically meaning that we could choose to attack the rebels out by the sea or the kingdom right here. It kept them guessing what we would do next. But something kept me guessing what we would do next was my tendency to have really bad rolls when I was moving my ship in the ocean. Essentially, it took my ship a lot longer to get over to Maria than I was expecting. And Sethith was already riding here on his horse, and he was basically in eastern Maria before my ship was anywhere close to getting in. So suddenly our strategy went from, ooh, where are we going to attack next, to the Kingdom Alliance being all like, yo, Sethith is over here, he's all by himself, let's ride up and attack him before the raiders even have a chance to arrive. So quickly the Anacrian player had to adapt their strategy and they had to ride Sethith into this neutral building over here. This is the Sylvan Outpost. This is basically a wood elf neutral building. Kind of like how the desert compound where I was hanging out allowed me to train camels and mercenaries. This place over here allows you to train wood elves. And just like the desert compound, it's fairly fortified, at least from the front. It has a pretty tough gate that you can't get through unless you get something that can attack buildings, and neither the rebels nor the kingdom had anything that could do that yet, which meant the only real way for anyone to attack it would be from the back going through the water, and that's typically not a very good idea either because it slows you down so much. So before Sethith could get intercepted, he rode with his horse into this Sylvan outpost and recruited the elves to join his cause. He recruited 3 Sylvan Rangers, which are basically really capable ranged bowman units. I mean, they're elves after all, elves are gonna be really good with bows and arrows. And then 2 other units we call the Sylvan Blessed. I think I've got one right here. These guys are like little blade twirlers, basically, for the elves. He got 2 of them, and the really cool thing about the Sylvan Blessed is that when they are next to each other, they get a +1 pre-roll bonus to defense. So naturally in that Sylvan Outpost, we positioned our Blessed at the rear to kind of guard that rear entrance in. Sethith was standing on his horse in the middle of the outpost, and we had the Rangers standing up on the walls to shoot the enemy as they came in. And let me just say, what we thought was going to be a little detour at this Sylvan Outpost ended up being a fairly long battle. Essentially what happened is King Mateo, after running around in the snow, picked up an elemental ice mallet, something that's very powerful, and started running in towards the Sylvan Outpost. Now the other kingdom units weren't so close, but he still had a Bear Knight hop on a horse and ride out to attack the outpost as well. As far as the rebels' contribution to this attack, there was only Roskius coming in. So we were like, okay, We got Sethith, we got some elves. He's got to fight off 2 leaders, King Mateo and Roskies, and a Bear Knight. We figured at the very least he'd be able to kind of keep them out and hold the line until the raiders could arrive and really split up the attention of the people in this Kingdom Alliance. Now, if you're thinking back to what happened when my raiders attacked the rebels, you might remember that Roskies has an ability that me and Anacria completely forgot about. He had that signal flare. So what we thought was going to be kind of like a light little skirmish, we had to keep these 2 heroes out, we were a little bit worried about that, really changed dramatically when Roskius showed up. He came up to the rear of the outpost and fired off a signal flare and popped 3 more rebel units right in that vicinity. And now we were suddenly looking at a little siege here. So how did this play out? Well, our rangers were able to kill off the Bear Knight as he was riding in on the horse. Basically, the horse got right in front of the outpost and the Bear Knight ended up getting killed. And once your rider of your horse is dead, the horse can't do anything until someone else hops on it. So far, so good. But in the rear, we had Mateo coming in through the water to attack in melee. We had some rebel units coming in to attack in melee. Roskies himself is a ranged unit with his pistol, so he didn't even need to get to melee. He was able to just kind of stand back and fire at a distance. Now, the situation might look a little rough for Anacria. They've got their 2 Sylvan Blessed, they've got their rangers that can shoot, but Sethith is just kind of sitting there on his horse. It doesn't look like he can attack. But, plot twist, Sethith actually can attack from his position. If you watched part 1, you might remember how Sethith was really hard to kill in that first stage. He has a lot of armor when he's still King Sethith. Well, in his second stage, he's much easier to kill. He doesn't have any universal armor, he doesn't have any elemental armor, he doesn't have any martial armor. His armor is only against very particular attack types. But that is because Sethith becomes much more of an offensive powerhouse in his second form. And he comes equipped with his Sword of Death. And his Sword of Death is pretty neat. It's a normal sword, but it also has kind of like a zappy zap death ray thing that it can shoot from it. It doesn't go very far. It only goes, I think, 2 spaces. But if you look at the way this battle was going, 2 spaces was exactly what Sethith needed to be able to reach people with that Sword of Death. And the other interesting thing about the Sword of Death is it is unblockable damage that you receive from it. And the Kingdom player has just marched King Mateo right up into the range of that Sword of Death. But King Mateo can't actually hurt Sethith. So while the rebels and the Kingdom units were trying to break through those Sylvan Blessed, Sethith was zapping away at Mateo with his Sword of Death. And it's as this is happening when finally my ship arrives in Maria and it starts making its way down the Marian River so that we can split up the attention of our enemies here. I chose to go down the river because I could attack the Rebel Command Center, which was built far away from the rest of the Rebel buildings, and also all of the Kingdom buildings at the same time. And this time, my boat's a little bit bigger, and I've also built the Fireball Catapult on my boat, which will allow me to deal massive damage to buildings around me, as long as I can land the missiles of firing that catapult. Now, while this fight is happening, I believe one of the Rebel crossbowmen is there, I think even with a musket, so he's able to deal some pretty hefty damage from a distance against Sethith. And Roskius Matres is there, and Roskius himself attacks with a pistol. So they can shoot right through the Blessed and focus on Sethith. But what they realize is Sethith has a height advantage because he's standing on top of his horse. And this is when really our first kind of bit of animal suffering comes into play in this game. Because the rebels realize very quickly, Sethith is very hard to kill right now because he has a +1 bonus because he's standing on top of his horse. But that horse is ripe for the picking. And so fire gets reoriented against the horse. And the horse puts up a pretty good fight. It rolls really well, much to the frustration of the rebel players. But still within a few turns, that horse is killed and Sethith is down on his feet. As this happens, the Sylvan Blessed are killed and the rebels are able to come in and attack Sethith directly. Now, King Mateo has already withdrawn at this point. He was way too weak and he's starting to work his way around the front of the building. But that's okay, because it looks like the rebels are gonna lock Sethith in there and get him killed. Or are they? Because if you remember, the front of the Sylvan outpost isn't a wall, it's a door. And so what does Anacria do? Well, they open the door and Sethith runs out the front gate and hops on none other than the Bear Knight's former horse, stealing that horse from the Kingdom player and using that horse to run down King Mateo de Leon as King Mateo tries to run away. And boy oh boy, Sethith then executes the King of the Cussed Kingdom. This, we thought, was going to be the big pivotal moment. The Kingdom's king is dead. Now, that's not the end of the world for the Cussed Kingdom, because they did already have Prince Jalen on the field, and the second King Mateo got killed, Prince Jalen was elevated to the status of king, making him a much more formidable foe. But unlike Setheth, the kingdom doesn't have any more lives after it, so all we gotta do is kill King Jalen, and then the kingdom player is more or less stalled where they are. And we have forces already closing in on both sides of this kingdom base. So at this point, Anacri and I are feeling pretty darn cocky. We've eliminated King Mateo, we're attacking on both fronts. Setheth still has to ride away on the horse, but we're feeling pretty good about our odds. Now my new ship that has arrived, I believe it's called the Whale Scar. This thing I've beefed up with a fireball catapult on the top of it. This is just like in the original Lego Vikings set, there was this kind of catapult mechanism at the top. And it has these multiple technic projectiles that you can fling and fire from it. And the way that this catapult works is it doesn't deal a ton of damage with one hit, but if you hit something and deal damage in your attack, then you can keep firing until you either don't hit something or you run out of projectiles. And boy oh boy, firing all 4 projectiles does deal a hefty amount of damage. So the first thing I wanted to do was get this catapult into a position where it could fire this way, because that is where the mine was that the kingdom player had. It's not there anymore, because I blew it up, but that is where it was. And so I rotated my catapult around and I began to open fire on that mine. And one note about how this game works, there are a number of war machines that you have to fire manually, and these things are pretty stressful to use in a turn. I think it's stressful to roll a die and see what number gets rolled. Boy oh boy, when you're firing one of these and it's 100% dependent on how well you fire it, you start to sweat a little bit whenever you fire one. But fortunately, it's not that hard of a catapult to fire. I had pretty good luck with it my first few turns when I was utilizing this weapon. Let's see how I can do now. Let's see if I can try to hit in this general area over here. Oh. So I don't know, if the mine were still there now and I was going off of those shots, I would say the first one probably would have hit. That second one didn't really go anywhere though, so my turn would have probably ended there. Fortunately though, in the actual game, I did land all 4 of those shots and I dealt a lot of damage to that mine. I didn't fully kill it, but I didn't really want to fully kill it. I brought it down to the point where it was very heavily damaged and it couldn't actually mine resources anymore. It would have to be repaired anyway for it to be able to do anything. And at this point, I was so cocky. I was like feeling the high. I was like, we've eliminated the mine. We've eliminated King Mateo. Prince Jalen is now the king, but he doesn't have too many forces with him. I've got Bertnoth on my ship, and then what does the kingdom player do? In an act of what I think is utter stupidity, the kingdom player recruits some horses right in front of their stables. So they had in here, let me actually pop it in so you can see better what this looked like. So they had the Simeon stables over here, and I think they recruited, it was either 1 or 2 horses, I can't remember. Maybe I've got a picture that shows this, but they've got this horse sitting here right in front of the stable, and they didn't have any units next to it at the time. So nothing was kind of there to ride it. It looked like the horse was trained, and then maybe like King Jalen was gonna come down and hop on it and try to either fight me off or go fight off Setheth and try to finish him off. But the horse was so close to my boat, and I'm sitting with Bertnoth, and I'm like, God, Bertnoth is such a strong guy. If I could get him onto that horse, then I could really wreak some havoc. He'd have a height advantage on what units there are in front of the castle. And so I charged Bertnoth in. I got him on the horse. I was like, haha, I've stolen your horse. You can't do anything about me now. And I rode the horse in the front gate. I was so confident because Bertnoth is such a heavy hitter. I rode him in at that front gate and I attacked, I think, one of the Kingdom Arbalists there, and I think I killed him in one turn. I was like, oh, you better watch out, Kingdom player. Bertnoth is coming your way. I kind of figured at this point, just like Bertnoth was my hero that was capable to kill King Setheth, since Bertnoth is such an offensive powerhouse, I could potentially rely on him to kill King Jalen now, and then the Kingdom player would be wiped out of the game, basically. They would be really stalled, and we'd be so close to victory if that were to happen. Now, unfortunately, that is not what happened, because the Kingdom player had set a trap for me. I thought that the horse was a stupid move on the Kingdom player's part, but it was literally purchased as bait to lure Bertnoth into hopping on the horse and charging into the castle. Why would the Kingdom player want Bertnoth there? Well, that is because the Kingdom player had a very particular unlockable card. So if you watched part 1 of this playthrough, you saw that at the beginning of the game, one of the things we did, we picked our unlockable cards, and that said different things we could do to unlock really powerful units on the battlefield. That was why Sepith was riding out, and he's been trying to get himself hurt so many times, because Sepith is really hoping to get limbs cut off so he can be rebuilt into his really superior godlike form. And sure, while that one's kind of a pain in the butt and that takes a while to do, that's something that is kind of guaranteed to happen if you let Sepith do enough fighting, as long as you're able to heal him up and keep him alive in between those fights. Now, the Kingdom player had drawn one of the most situational unlockable cards. This is a card called Eagle Aspect, and it is used to unlock Vernicus, the giant eagle. And I'm not gonna lie, when I created this card, I thought, this is a really cool card. I would love to see this come into play, but this is super situational. I'm not gonna hold my breath on seeing it anytime soon in any games that we play. So I was quite surprised to see it get deployed right away in kind of like my inaugural game since I put this all back together. So how Eagle Aspect works is, if you read the card, and I'll pull it up on the screen here, it goes like this. It's got some flavor text that says, Jalen and his knights must prove they are worthy of Vernicus's intervention. All steps must be performed in a single unit command. So this is a card where we have to do the whole thing in one unit command, which is really hard to do. All these conditions have to be met at once, but if they are, then you can summon a giant eagle to fight for your side. So what is step number 1? So step number 1 is Jalen or a Hawk Knight has to fall 10 or more pegs. That's because Jalen and his Hawk Knights have Eagle Aspect or Hawk Aspect. They ignore fall damage when they fall off something. And if you look at the way that the Kingdom Castle is set up right now, we have King Jalen standing at the top of the castle and Bertnoth standing at the bottom. So King Jalen, on his move, jumps off of the top of the castle, using that Eagle Aspect to fall down to Bertnoth's level. Now, the real advantage of having this card is that it gives you a bonus, because once you do that, the affected unit has a precision rating of 1 for the rest of the unit command. So that means that whenever Jalen's attacking until his unit command is over, he's gonna critical hit every single time. Which is good, because step 2 of this unlockable process is to kill a hero. And I don't even know if the Kingdom player was hoping to kill Bertnoth in this situation. I mean, obviously it would be ideal, but they were counting on at least dealing very heavy damage to him. And this is basically the absolute worst situation to be in for Bertnoth, because King Jalen has an attack called Eagle Strike that allows him to attack 4 times in one unit command. Now, when he does that, he takes a higher precision rating than normal, so his chance of critical hitting is not as high. However, his precision rating's been overridden to 1 for this entire unit command. So he's gonna have 4 attacks on Bertnoth. They're gonna critical hit every time. And if you think that King Jalen is not a heavy hitter on the battlefield, ooh, you are mistaken. And so King Jalen jumped down, attacks Bertnoth 4 times. He does have to do all 4 attacks, but on that 4th attack, he kills Bertnoth. He takes Bertnoth from full health to dead in one fell swoop. And since this is an unlockable card, at the same time, once Bertnoth is dead, Vernicus, the giant eagle, was summoned within 4 spaces of King Jalen. And needless to say, I was no longer feeling so cocky about this fight. So what happens next is a little desperate on my part. Between the Eagle and Jalen, my men start getting slaughtered over here. I've got to light my own ship on fire because I don't want it to fall into the enemy hands again. I'm about to lose another wave. Before I do though, I do some damage. I do attack the command center that was built here, and I do some heavy damage to it with my catapult, and I do kill it, which hopefully is enough of a setback to really put the rebels back, so that when we attack again with a 3rd wave, we can finish off both of these teams. I also do damage on the other side of the Cursed Kingdom. I attack their chapel. I think I destroy that as well. So I go out with a bit of a blaze of glory, and my ship starts to burn up. I confer at this point with my ally, and we decide that the best course of action is to lock down these 2 while we amass our next attack wave. So Anacre has been quietly progressing to Tech Age 4 during all of this. They build the Scorpion Barge, which is a large, massive ship that can carry most of the Anacrean army. And he has built an army that is getting on that ship, and they're going to sail in for a 3rd attack wave. In the meantime, my next attack wave will be coming with my new ship and a new raiding party coming in to do one final attack against the Kingdom and the rebels and bring them to their knees. But in order for all this to happen and be successful, we've got to stunt the growth of both of these teams, and I do that by playing my Scepter of the Titans that I got when I killed Setheth in his first stage. Scepter of the Titans is a great quest reward card. It allows me to change the environmental conditions in a particular area to anything I want, including catastrophes. And what I did was I triggered a solar flare over here in the Kingdom of Maria. Solar flares turn everything into lava unless it's covered by a roof. Buildings are not affected by this, but any unit that is standing on top of a building, if they don't have a roof over them, then they're going to be flash fried if they cannot enter lava without safety. Now, because it's a catastrophe, they get 5 rounds to prepare for it, and so what ends up happening is for the next 5 rounds, these teams are rebuilding buildings. They are trying to get their men into safety. Some of them are running away into the mountains, into Legna, where there won't be a solar flare. And it's while all this chaos is happening that our forces are coming to arrive and attack in the final attack wave. The attack wave that should finish off the rebels and the kingdom and secure victory for the Anacreon Raider Alliance. Now, during those 5 rounds, Vernicus is still causing trouble. We thought that Vernicus would be a big problem, like a total game changer for the Kingdom player. And this might be my fault. It could be perhaps that Vernicus is a bit underpowered, so I'll be revisiting that in between this game and the next game. But part of it definitely has to do with how Vernicus was used. Now, the way Vernicus functions is he picks up units and he carries them with him, and then he drops them to their death. And that's really his primary way of dealing damage to enemy units. If he goes in and tries to fight directly, he does not have armor. He's got very high defense, but no armor, which means that he's just a few bad rolls away from death at any point. And I think the Kingdom player was a little overconfident with Vernicus. He flew him in and attacked all my barbarians at once. And this was not a pretty fight for my barbarians, but it also wasn't pretty for Vernicus. Vernicus got heavily injured in this fight, and then chose to run away. And when running away, he took more damage from leaving the engagement too. Vernicus was very close to death. All the while, our Anacreon player had been sneaking another unit over to this side of the battlefield, and that was one of the Varaka. A Varaka is a lesser vampire that's recruited from the neutral building way over in Anacrea. So this had been recruited a while ago and had been slowly making its way over into the Kingdom area. And the advantage of the Varaka is that it can fly. So the Varaka flew in and tried to intercept Vernicus, that eagle. So Vernicus ran off in the other direction over into Legna, but if you remember, over in Legna, that was where Setheth was running away from Roskius. And yes, that's been happening this whole time. Setheth has been running farther away, Roskius has been running up to him, but when Vernicus got in range of Setheth, Setheth stopped running away and ran right at Vernicus to kill him. And Setheth dealt quite critical damage on Vernicus. I think Vernicus was 2 wounds away from death. And Roskius himself is very low too, because Setheth has been dealing some damage back at Roskius while running away as well. So we had this exchange going on here. We have Setheth fighting the giant eagle and fighting Roskius at once, but you can't put up that fight forever. Roskius shoots Setheth, rolls high enough to get through his armor, and kills off the Dark Lord in his second stage. The eagle Vernicus is still alive, and Roskius is still alive as well. That being said, I think Roskius was 3 wounds away from death at this point. So it might seem like the Kingdom and the Rebels won the day. The barbarians are dead and gone. Vernicus and Roskius are heavily injured, but Setheth is dead and gone. However, there's still one Varaka over there, and that Varaka flew in and attacked Vernicus, and my god, this lucky little vampire managed to kill Vernicus. The giant eagle unlockable defeated by a lesser vampire. And then for the icing on the cake, I had another quest reward I had accrued, I think just from giving a donation to one of the clients, and this quest reward was an assassination contract. Assassination Contract is a card that you play to deal 4 unblockable wounds to any enemy unit. I think it's an infantry unit of some sort. And Roskius was less than 4 wounds away from death. So even though it looked like the Kingdom and the Rebels had fully won against us and fended us off, Vernicus was killed by the Varaka, then I played the assassination card, and Roskius himself was eliminated too. A solar flare is incoming. We have a massive 3rd wave of units coming to attack, and at this point it truly feels like it's only a matter of time until the Rebels and the Kingdom are crushed once and for all. But to see how that finally unfolds and how all of this concludes, we'll have to check out part 3 of the playthrough. Thank you for watching, my friends. If you want to see the final part of this playthrough, make sure that you are subscribed so that you can follow along with me. I'm gonna try to do a much better job, get that released hopefully within the next few weeks, as opposed to, the next few months like I did with this one. Otherwise, my friends, be happy, be healthy, be well, and I'll see you next time here in the Circle of Realms.